Welcome everybody back to another Full Build Friday, where we're flipping the script and in the midst of gorillas. That is to say, we've got a bit of a theme going on this month for April, here at Full Build Friday. Though, I'd have to admit, we're going to cheat just a tiny bit for this one. For this week's character, you see, is not an ape, but a monkey. Specifically, we're building League's very own Wukong, the Monkey King.
I will be the best.
I know, this is a monkey, not an ape, but, I'm not an educational channel, so there's that. Either way, I hope you'll give the video a like and subscribe to the channel despite that. With those formalities out of the way, I want to start talking build goals, but there's one more thing that I have to cover. I simply want to reiterate that we are specifically building Wukong from League of Legends, not any of the 100 other Wukongs that show up in any tangentially Chinese game, and beyond. Wukong into the monkeyverse when? With that being the case, our so-called Wukong is actually a monkey-like Playstyle who was born under the name of Kong. He was ousted from his village after playing too many pranks on the people there, and after wandering the world for a bit, came under the tutelage of Master Yi, the Wuju bladesman. Kong was trained in combat by the swordsman, who eventually added the Wu prefix to his name, and let him loose upon the world. Within League, Wukong is a melee diver, who fights using his staff and innate Vestayan magic. His passive, Stone Skin, lets him thrive in the thick of battle by granting him stacking armor and health regen whenever he strikes enemies. His first ability plays into that. Crushing Blow enhances his next basic attack with increased damage, range, and armor reduction. Outside of that ability, he has some more mystical powers. Warrior Trickster is the first of these. This turns Wukong invisible while he leaves behind a clone that will monkey see, monkey do some of his moves. He can create even more clones with Nimbus Strike, which features a dash towards an enemy. As he does this, he summons a pair of clones, and they each strike different targets before leaving him with bonus attack speed. We go from these more mystical moves to his ultimate then, which might seem a bit basic compared to the others. Cyclone simply causes him to speed up and start spinning to smash all nearby foes with his staff and knock them into the air. He can recast his ultimate, but it's still a surprisingly simple move for the so-called Monkey King. In short, our Manic Monkey Master mixes martial might and mysticism, supplementing sweeping and smashing strikes from his staff with invisibility and the power to create clones. His Stone Skin lets him survive being in the thick of battle, but even in such situations, he maintains a mirthful manner. For the ancestry of this atypical ape, we're going to use one that I thought I would be getting more use out of this whole month, the Vanara. This is a perfect fit for Wukong, representing his nature as a Shimon Vestayan. He's going to use a heritage whose pronunciation I am sure to butcher. The Bandagi, which allows him to ignore difficult terrain from crowds. This is admittedly kinda minor, but could be considered to resemble the ghosting effect of his Cyclone ultimate, and that's kinda nice. He uses Climbing Tail as his ancestry feat, netting him a bonus to checks on climbs, lowering the hands he needs to climb with, and then the Combat Climber skill feat. That just leaves us with his ability boost. Now as Vanara, he gets a boost to dexterity, but he gets a free boost as well, and that will go to strength, as we're going to build Wukong as a melee mauler that likes to get into the thick of it.
Into the thick of it?
After struggling for a bit on what background to use, I settled on Magical Misfit. I like this one because it mentions that Wukong used his magic to cause trouble and escape the consequences from doing so, which was one of the best fits to be found for this puckish primate. This makes him trained in Arcana and Underworld lore, while also providing him with the Trick Magic Item skill feat. I'm not sure we'll really have the skill investment for this, but I feel like it at least fits thematically. The first ability boost from this background will apply to his intelligence, while the free boost again goes to strength. That brings us to Wukong's class, which is going to land on Magus, so he can serve as a hero of might and magic. In addition to the class boost to strength and the spellcasting capabilities that this offers him, which will represent his innate magic as a Vestayan and be covered a bit later, it also grants him the power to imbue his weapon with a spell and channel that into a strike. The oversimplification of spell strike aside, it will certainly be handy in resembling his crushing blow. On the topic of blows, Wukong here can make use of the Twisting Tree Hybrid Study. I haven't used this one before, but it has some real fun stuff to it. It makes staves deal more damage when you're wielding them one-handed, and also makes them agile. Or, if you take them into two hands, it gives them a whole host of traits, including reach. Furthermore, when he's in Arcane Cascade, he can switch the number of hands he has on his staff with much greater ease. Outside of wielding weapons, he also snatches up some spells, instead of gaining a first level class feat. From his cantrips, I like Figment for Wukong's prankster nature, whereas I think Telekinetic Projectile is the best cantrip to represent his crushing blow. Though it does admittedly lack the armor reduction, which honestly might be a little hard to find. Since Wukong received training in Arcana from his background, he will be trained in Acrobatics, and then take further skill training in Athletics, Deception, Stealth, and Thievery. Furthermore, he applies his 4 free boost to Strength, Dexterity, Constitution, and then Intelligence. While one Strength is his primary combat stat, needs Dexterity for an Archetype, and will want a better Intelligence if he wants to use spells with saving throws when he unleashes them through his spell strikes. Unfortunately, even with that boost, his Dexterity isn't quite there to take up his Archetype just yet, so he'll start second level with Force Fang, a focus spell that gives him some guaranteed damage, but is also just useful for netting him another focus point. Then, with how quickly he can switch his handedness on his staff, I like Dirty Trick as a skill feat, which is multi-purpose. Thematically, it plays into his past as a prankster, while mechanically, the clumsy condition it afflicts might resemble the armor reduction inflicted by his crushing blow. Since Wukong already gains second rank spells at 3rd level, the only class feature he gains here is a skill increase, which will be applied to Thievery, making him an expert that can better use Dirty Trick. We'll take Fleet as his general feat, since Cyclone does come with a small speed buff, but then the only spell here that really stands out to me is Oaken Resilience, with the resistance it provides partially resembling the armor granted by his Stone Skin passive. Getting into his 4th level, he selects Student of the Staff, which adds the deadly trait to his weapon, gives him crit specialization, and allows him to prepare property runes from his spellbook onto his magic staff, which is pretty slick. I really love this feat. It's small but very cool. For his skill feat, Quick Jump just fits in with some of the mobility we see in his kit, and is probably the most useful low-level skill feat, though I suspect there's some contenders for that title. 5th level then kicks off with ability boost to Strength, Dexterity, Intelligence, and Charisma. That boost to Intelligence makes him train in Occultism on the off chance he can use Trick Magic item, whereas his actual skill increase makes him an expert in Stealth. He also becomes an expert in his reflex saves and with his weapons through his class features, and taps into 3rd rank spells. Before looking at those, he gains Ragdia's Revelry, an ancestry feat that lets him steal from an adjacent creature that misses a strike against him, though for some reason this is only once per day. As for his spells, Haste could be handy for the attack speed granted by his Nimbus Cloud, and with Day's Weight inflicting the fatigued condition, you might be able to use that to reference the armor shred of his crushing blow. Additionally, per the remaster of the Magus, you can use Day's Weight on a spell strike, so you can deliver some damage along with it. The increase to dexterity from Wukong's last level will allow him to take the Staff Acrobat Dedication as his 6th level class feat. This starts off with a random assortment of benefits, ranging from enhancing his jumps, letting him balance better, and shove or trip even while wielding his staff in 2 hands. When it comes to his skill feat, he favors Slippery Prey, so that he can more easily escape people trying to hold him accountable for the trouble that he's caused. When Wukong gets into 7th level, he gains Weapon Specialization as well as Studious Spells. I'm not sold on the specific spells that the Twisting Tree Hybrid Study adds to this, but Sure Strike is at least always handy. He also becomes a master in Thievery with his skill increase, and then gets Toughness, since he doesn't have the constitution to take Fast Recovery yet. He does actually have a spell he likes from among the 4th rank options, with Mountain Resilience replacing the Oaken Resilience that he took earlier, simply covering more resistances, and not having the weakness of the wood-based spell. When the Wild and Willful Wukong reaches 8th level, he can grab Staff Sweep from his Archetype, which will let him shove or trip 2 creatures as a single action. The trip aspect of this is meant to represent the knock-up effect of his Cyclone, sending them to the ground and eating up actions in that regard rather than tossing them upwards. Aiding these efforts is Titan Wrestler, so that he can use these maneuvers, or others for when he's putting his staff in one hand, on towering terrors, such as Cho'Gath or Malphite. There's a couple class features at 9th level, such as Alertness, Resolve, and Expert Spellcaster. Furthermore, he becomes a master in stealth with his skill increase. He follows that up with Ragdia's Dance as his ancestry feat, another limited use reaction that triggers when an enemy succeeds at a strike against him, and may let him slip out of flanking if the foe can't succeed at a will save. The big spell as he gets into 5th rank here is Blink Charge, calling to mind the dash and strike that he makes as part of Nimbus Strike. That means that we have the basic component and the speed buff of this ability covered, but we're still kind of missing the clones. However, I've got some plans for that, which we'll see down the road. For now, we'll look at 10th level, which comes with ability boost to Strength, Constitution, Intelligence, and Charisma. Once again, that boost to Intelligence makes him train in Nature, just to expand the possibilities of his trick magic item. As to his class feat, Lunging Spell Strike is another feat unique to the Twisting Tree, and allows him to extend the reach of his staff whenever he spell strikes, akin to the extra reach afforded to his Crushing Blow. While that covers more mechanical aspects of the character, Lengthy Diversion as his skill feat leans more into his background, and lore as a prankster and trickster. Looking at 11th level, Wukong gains medium armor expertise, as well as expertise in athletics through his skill increase. His boosted constitution means that he can finally take fast recovery as his general feat, which is meant to call to mind the health regen included as part of his passive. More important, however, is Mislead, a 6th rank spell that lets him turn invisible while leaving a duplicate of himself behind. This is perfect for his warrior trickster, aside from the lack of his clone attacking, though if you want to get more into that, you could have had Wukong pick up Illusory Creature from earlier in this build. With those sweet spells secured, we can look at Levering Strike for our 12th level. This is another class feat from his archetype, and though it requires the Press trait, the Agile trait of his one-handed staves might come in handy here. More important is that it leaves an enemy off guard, reducing their AC in another way to simulate the armor shred of Crushing Blow. He then grabs Swift Sneak with his skill feat, using this to more swiftly slink about after turning invisible with the Mislead, so that he doesn't have to give away his trick. Lovely Lucky level 13 sees Wukong gain Weapon Mastery and become a master in Athletics. It further sees him gain the Monkey Spirit's Ancestry feat, and here it is. This is how we'll mainly represent his clones. Sure, they lack the ability to deal damage, but I love envisioning this as him summoning a whole host of himself to harass his foes. It also just fantastically fits the more classical lore of the mythological Wukong. Another class feat at 14th level sees him gain Hasted Assault. Aside from being another focus spell, this is a single action to hasten our Happy Howler for a minute, which will likely favor over Haste itself, to represent the attack speed from Nimbus Strike. Speaking of quickened, his skill feat is also going to be Quick Climb, which is entirely based on the fact that he is a monkey type Stay-in, and this will just let him climb better. With his 15th level, he gains ability boost to Strength, Dexterity, Intelligence, and Charisma. From his class features, he gains Juggernaut, as well as greater weapon specialization, and also becomes a legend in Thievery to aid him in prank pulling. Featherstep as his general feat is, once again, based on the ghosting effect of his Cyclone Ultimate, as it allows him to more easily move through difficult terrain. 16th level though is a bit of a weird one. I ask you to stick with me for it. Resounding Cascade might not make sense at first, but the armor reduction of Crushing Blow means that the target is taking extra damage from everybody in League of Legends. Resounding Cascade plays into that a teensy tiny bit by coming from the opposite end, increasing the damage of nearby allies rather than reducing defenses. This is a bit shaky, and the feat itself has questionable value given the area it affects, so I'll also suggest Overwhelming Spell Strike to punch through the resistances of foes for a similar idea. His skill feat though is a little bit easier, with Powerful Leap just enhancing the distance of his leaps and bounds in a manner that is always handy to have around. From there, our Mannequin Madcap Macaque manages Master Spellcaster and Medium Armor Mastery from his class features, as well as a skill increase that makes him a legend in Athletics. I like the flavor of his Unfettering Prankster Ancestry feat more than its actual effect, but maybe the ability to ignore difficult terrain fits in, once again, with the coasting effect of his Cyclone Ultimate. As for his 18th level, there's a few options that our staff-swinging simian could select, but I like Striker's Scroll for basic functionality, allowing Wukong to use the scrolls that he picks up on his staff, so he doesn't have to spend as many of his own spell slots, which are rather limited. Then, following that athletics increase from last level, I feel like he's obligated to take Cloud Jump, given both the inspiration of the character and the fact that he does briefly ride upon one for Nimbus Strike, or a bit more regularly with his Radiant Wukong skin. In addition to Striker's Scroll hopefully helping with the low spell slots of a Magus, 19th level gives us Double Spell Strike, effectively putting his spells on a real low cooldown. He also becomes legendary in Stealth, and takes incredible initiative as his general feat, resembling the character of this confident but capricious Capuchin. Coming into 20th level, Wukong takes his ability boost to Strength, Constitution, Intelligence, and Charisma. As we've seen a few times, that increase to Intelligence means that he can become trained in Religion, which is, once more, all for the sake of his Trick Magic Item feat. On the topic of feats, we'll take Whirlwind Spell to represent his Cyclone Ultimate. It's hard to find a spell that really takes advantage of this, but Chain Lightning does come to mind, and the visual of that is kinda crazy to me. You could use that to truly become the Storm. And you can also use Legendary Sneak to become the Calm before it, disappearing even without the advantage of invisibility, getting into position, and then unleashing a savage spinning strike. Or at least that's one way to play it. This build features Wukong as a versatile character, and part of that might be based on the spells you pick up that I didn't mention here. But I think optimizing him is going to require some setup. Most Magi I knew do a ton of pre-buffing, but Wukong is built more for debuffing foes, with the likes of Dirty Trick, sneaking into position with enemies none the wiser, or using spells like Day's Wait to lower the defenses of his victims before unleashing more potent effects. He can operate safely with the likes of Mountain Resilience and the reach of his staff, particularly with Lunging Spell Strike, before darting into combat with Blink Charge and then unleashing a Whirlwind spell in the midst of his adversaries. Now, with that all said, if you want to take this build into a free Archetype game, obviously you're taking Staff Acrobat. You can use your freed up feats to maybe take Reactive Strike so that he can better utilize the reach of his staff, and after that, you're going for something like Wizard or Witch, giving him some extra spells to use for utility or spell strikes, while also having them still scale off of his intelligence. Alternatively, you could go more flavorful and pick up Spell Trickster to play into his magic and theme as a prankster, or Monk for monastic weaponry to get more out of his staff. That is our boisterous belligerent baboon built, but does he live up to the illustrious name of Wukong? Let's review and find out. Wukong the Monkey King is a bandagey Vanara Magus of the Twisting Tree hybrid study and a magical misfit background. An indefatigable prankster, he has the likes of Dirty Trick, Monkey Spears, and investments into stealth and theory to help represent those habits. The Magus class itself covers a mix of magic and martial skill that Wukong wields, providing him with spells and combat capability. Initially, he can use Oaken Resilience for his Stone Skin passive, before swapping to Mountain Resilience, and he also has fast recovery for the health regeneration of this passive. Just about any spell strike can work for Crushing Blow, with its reach coming from the Twisting Tree's study, especially as he gets Lunging Spell Strike. But for the armor reduction stuff, he might need to imbue his staff with something like Day's Wait. For his Warrior Trickster, he's somewhat limited to Mislead, but could also go for Illusory Creature, and then just sneak around with Legendary Sneak until he's in a better position to strike. Blink Charge offers the best option for the initial dash of his Nimbus Strike, with the clones represented by his choice of Mad Monkeys, or again, Illusory Creature. For the attack speed, he starts with Haste, but can eventually build up to Hastened Assault to become quickened as a mere focus spell. We've got a couple features that cover the ghosting of his ult, including his heritage, but Whirlwind Strike is going to stand in for his Cyclone itself, one that he can charge with spells if they've got the targets for it. A perennial prankster prone to prodding to the point of problems, this puckish primate powerfully pummels prosecutors in a paste while perpetuating plentiful and perfidious plots. I'd love to know what you think of this build and what other builds you'd like to see in a comment. If you like what you see here and want more, check out the Monster Monday blog, which is linked below along with the Twitter and Discord. Thanks for watching, and have a fantastic Friday.
The monkey! The monkey!